exec said that he used the Dodgers as his personal credit card. He once had to take out an emergency personal loan just to make payroll. He lied to Dodger fans about how much he was going to spend on players, and a lot of the money that he did spend went to terrible contracts like Jason Schmidt, Andrew Jones, and Juan Pierre. He abandoned international scouting and signing players in Latin America, Japan, and other baseball-rich countries around the world. He rejected blockbuster trades that would have given the Dodgers their best chance to win the World Series because he said he couldn't afford it. He was once sued for negligence after a fan was beaten into a coma at Dodger Stadium. He used the Dodgers Dream Foundation charity to pay his friends. He once used the Dodgers' money to hire a Russian sidekick to watch games and think blue and channel his energy towards the players to help them win games. Under him, the Dodgers' attendance plummeted to historic lows. His wife announced their divorce a day before the NLCS. A week later, he fired her from her position as the team's chief executive and changed the locks to her Dodger Stadium office. He paid off the largest divorce settlement in California history. He bankrupted the Dodgers and then, without ever spending a dime of his own money to buy the team, walked away with nearly $1 billion. This is the story about how a man sunk Dodger blue into the red and ended up with more green than anyone could have ever imagined.
Strike three. Dodgers have won it all in 2020.
Franck rubbed the Dodgers' demise under Frank McCourt. Meet Frank H. McCourt Jr., a real estate developer from Boston who once attempted to buy his hometown Boston Red Sox back in 2001. His plan was to leverage his massive waterfront parking lots that he owned in South Boston to purchase the Red Sox using none of his own money. His first plan of action after buying the franchise was to tear down historic Fenway Park. Can you imagine what kind of monster would want to tear down the Green Monster? Thankfully for Red Sox fans, the franchise ultimately was sold to an ownership group led by John Henry for $660 million. So even though he failed to buy his boyhood team, it still laid the blueprint for him buying the Dodgers a few years later. On January 29th in 2004, it was announced that MLB owners had approved of the $430 million sale of the Los Angeles Dodgers to Frank McCourt. McCourt said in a statement, "Welcome to a new era of Dodger baseball. I intend to restore the glory days of Dodger baseball with a team worthy of support from our fans. We've committed to not just buy this team, but to win a world championship." Now, McCourt had purchased the team from Fox, who was trying to get rid of the team for years, and he got a great deal on the Dodgers, getting them for a bargain price of $430 million, well below what the Boston Red Sox had sold for at $660 million a few years prior. And he did so without contributing one dime of his own money. McCourt borrowed 100% of the $430 million to purchase the Dodgers. In fact, Fox wanted to offload the Dodgers so bad that they loaned him $145 million to complete the purchase of the team. He used his parking lot as collateral against the Fox loan, and when he defaulted on the loan, Fox took control of the lot and sold it to wipe their hands clean of McCourt. So essentially, Frank McCourt, without using a dime of his own money, flipped a parking lot in Boston for one of the most iconic franchises in sports. Now, the Dodgers did have some success on the field under McCourt. In McCourt's first season, the Dodgers won 93 games and the National League West title for the first time since 1995. LA made their first postseason appearance and won their first postseason game in 16 years after a strong start from Jose Lima in Game 3 of the 2004 NLDS versus the Cardinals. In the 8 years of owning the Dodgers, LA won the NL West 3 times and made the NLCS twice. But even though McCourt loved to take credit for any Dodgers success when he owned the team, the reality is that most of the team's success during that era can be traced to the homegrown talent that had been drafted and developed before he took over, and the acquisition of Boston Red Sox controversial star Manny Ramirez. The Dodgers saw key contributors like Matt Kemp, James Loney, and Russell Martin come up from the farm and establish themselves at the big league level. And then they also hit big on a trade made by Ned Colletti, where they traded Milton Bradley and Antonio Perez for Andre Ethier. But the talent pipeline dried up during the McCourt era, and one big reason for that is McCourt's decision to cut funding for international scouting, most specifically in the Dominican Republic. In 1987, the Dodgers were pioneers in the DR, establishing the first ever American Baseball Academy in the country that produced more baseball stars in the world outside the United States, despite being roughly 1/9 the size of the state of California. The Dodgers discovered and developed future stars like Pedro Martinez, Raul Mondesi, and Adrian Beltre. Finding talent beyond U.S. soil was one of the hallmarks of the franchise. LA famously scouted the legendary Fernando Valenzuela out of Mexico and brought him to the States, where Fernando Mania was born. A decade and a half later, they signed Hideo Nomo from Japan and gave birth to Nomo Mania. They would have success with Chan-Ho Park from South Korea. Hitting big on international talent had been a foundational cornerstone for the Dodgers, but Franck McCourt didn't think it was a lucrative investment. In 2008, the team did not account for any of the 115 international signings of at least $100,000. And then there was the Hall of Famer that got away. Adrian Beltre was coming off a breakout 2004 season where he led all of Major League Baseball with 48 home runs. He had an OPS of over 1,000, and he said he wanted to re-sign early with the Dodgers, but instead, the Dodgers lowballed him. The Dodgers offered half of what the Mariners were offering, and Beltre eventually signed a 5-year, $64 million contract with Seattle. And then there were the regrettable contracts. Jason Schmidt, Andrew Jones, Juan Pierre. The Dodgers signed Jason Schmidt to a 3-year, $47 million deal, and he appeared in a grand total of 10 games for the Dodgers, posting a 6.02 ERA in over 43 innings of work. Now, players get injured during contracts, but most of the time you can't fault that on the organization. But when it came to Jason Schmidt, they knew he was injured going into it, that he had a torn rotator cuff. And then there was the Andrew Jones contract. The Dodgers signed Jones to a 2-year, $36.2 million deal. He showed up to camp out of shape. He played in just 75 games in his 1 year with LA, hit 158, had a 505 OPS, and the following season, the Dodgers, they just released him and paid him the rest of the money because they didn't want him to take up another roster spot. Now, for me, what stings the most when it comes to the McCourt era is that despite him running the Dodgers into the ground, LA was close to winning the World Series twice. They advanced to the NLCS in 2008 and in 2009, and in both those years, the Dodgers could have added more talent to put themselves over the top after GM Ned Colletti had deals done for ace starters CC Sabathia and Cliff Lee, only to be denied by Franck McCourt, who didn't want to take on what would have been roughly an extra $4 million in salary to give the Dodgers their best chance of winning the Fall Classic. Former Dodgers GM Ned Colletti's book, The Big Chair, when trying to get McCourt to approve the trade, McCourt told Colletti, "I'm not going to give up all those prospects, and I'm not going to take on the extra money." So you had Franck McCourt crying over an extra $4 million when the Dodgers were still one of the most profitable teams in all of Major League Baseball. LA led the National League in attendance during McCourt's first 6 seasons, but he continued to shave payroll. When he bought the Dodgers, they had a $105 million payroll, which was 4th in Major League Baseball. In his second year, he cut the payroll to $92 million. The next year, down to $83 million. By his last year as the team owner, the Dodgers ranked 12th in Major League Baseball in payroll behind the Twins and the Brewers, 2 small market clubs. This was all after he had promised that he would keep the club's payroll in the top 25% of the league. So where did all the money go? Well, thanks to huge profits and cutting spending wherever they could, the McCourts had money to spend, and boy, did they ever. 9 multi-million-dollar homes, including a $21.25 million mega mansion in the ultra-posh Holmby Hills neighborhood of Los Angeles, right across the street from the Playboy Mansion. They dropped an extra $14 million to renovate it. And after they decided it wasn't big enough at over 16,000 square feet, they bought the house next door. And then they purchased a Malibu estate off of the Pacific Coast Highway from actress Courtney Cox for $27.5 million. Then when that mansion wasn't big enough for their lavish pool parties and egos, they bought the property next door for $19 million. They had a private jet on permanent standby. Jamie McCourt had hair and makeup sessions that cost over $10,000 a month. Hey, that's a very expensive mullet if you ask me. And then how weird is this? They used the Dodgers' money to hire a Russian psychic to watch the games and think blue and channel his V energy towards the players. Yeah, I don't think you needed to look inside your crystal baseball to know that bankruptcy was in the McCourt's future. But for now, the cash was rolling in. The Dodgers were successful on the field. Life appeared to be great for the McCourts, and then it all came crashing down. Jamie, who was the team's CEO, filed for divorce on the eve of the Dodgers-Phillies NLCS Game 1 in 2009. She alleged that her husband had mismanaged the Dodgers' funds for years. McCourt denied her allegations and responded by firing Jamie as the Dodgers CEO and said that she had ruined their marriage after having an affair with her driver. McCourt went so far as to changing the locks to her office at Dodger Stadium just in case she showed up. Now, since they were married for decades, Jamie sought half of the value of the Dodgers, and Franck also claimed that he had a signed document from Jamie where it proved that he had sole ownership over the Dodgers. The judge ruled that the contract was unenforceable and Jamie was entitled to half of the team's worth. They spent over $20 million in legal fees, where ultimately Franck was forced to pay $130 million to Jamie for her to give up her part of the team in what was believed to be the costliest divorce in the history of the state of California. One of the proudest organizations in sports was becoming a national laughingstock. And even though Franck McCourt was broke and the Dodgers owed a reported $573 million to creditors, Franck McCourt was refusing to sell the team. The only way out for McCourt was to sell the Dodgers for as much as he could, and at that time, Forbes had valued them at around $900 million. But Franck had a silver bullet in the Dodgers TV deal. The Dodgers TV deal was set to expire at the end of the 2013 season, and it was seen in the industry as potentially one of the most lucrative TV deals in sports. So all McCourt had to do was buy himself a few extra years, and then he could maximize his profits on the Dodgers. But that's when it went from bad to worse. From 2009 to 2011, attendance dropped by 22%, and for the first time in the 62 years the team shared the Southland, the Angels outdrew the Dodgers. Fans threatened to boycott the Dodgers and protested.
In other news now, more calls for Dodgers owner Franck McCourt to sell the team. Today, protesters gathered near Dodger Stadium demanding that fans boycott the game against the San Diego Padres.
I'm still a Dodger fan, but I don't want to support McCourt at all.
I wish I could meet him in person just so I could just plead with him. Please, just sell the team. You lost, man. No one wants you here. Just sell the team, cash in, and go, please.
Go back to Boston! Go back to Boston!
And then it gets really dark. On opening day in 2011, a Giants fan wearing a Buster Posey jersey named Brian Stowe was viciously beaten into a coma and suffered severe brain damage in the Dodger Stadium parking lot after the game. What does this have to do with Franck McCourt? Well, Franck McCourt had cheaped out on increased security around Dodger Stadium. In 2009, McCourt cut costs on stadium security. The Dodgers had been using off-duty police officers in uniform that cost around $50 per hour, but switched to undercover cops not in uniform that cost half the price. As a result, the Dodgers head of security resigned. Stowe would spend months in a coma, and eventually he would sue the Dodgers for negligence. Lawyers for Stowe claimed the team and former owner Franck McCourt failed to provide adequate security. Now, they found the Dodgers were negligent but absolved McCourt. Now, this is when MLB Commissioner Bud Selig appointed an outside monitor to oversee the Dodgers' expenses. McCourt was furious. He even called the commissioner un-American. With the league now having firsthand access to the Dodgers books, it became clear how much McCourt was leveraging the franchise and that he wasn't in a position to own and run a Major League Baseball team. McCourt took out a big multi-million-dollar loan against future season ticket sales and even charged the Dodgers $14 million a year to rent their own ballpark just to keep the organization financially afloat. It was also learned that the Dodgers Dream Foundation, which is a charity that was started to build baseball fields for underprivileged youth of Los Angeles, was paying one of McCourt's top cronies who ran the program, Howard Sunken, over $400,000 of its $1.6 million budget. So now with Bud Selig up his crawl and money drying up quick, Franck McCourt went back to Fox in an attempt to get an extension on the team's TV deal in return for an advance on money up front. LA was making upwards of $40 million a year on their current TV deal, but once it expired in 2 years, McCourt could create a bidding war for the Dodgers' new TV deal and accept the highest offer. The Dodgers' next TV deal was set to become one of the most lucrative in sports and surely would bring him anywhere from 5 to 10 times the $40 million a year he was currently making. So if McCourt could just find a way to hold on to the team, he'd make out like a bandit. So what McCourt did was he went to Fox and tried to borrow money from them against future TV deal earnings, and Fox said, hell yeah, we would love to take on the rights to broadcast Dodger games off the market to avoid having to get into a bidding war with other networks. So Fox and McCourt, they agreed in principle to a new 20-year television deal worth $3 billion starting in 2014 that would have increased the Dodgers' annual TV deal from $40 million a year to $150 million a year. Of the $3 billion, McCourt was set to get $385 million in advance and use $200 million for the team and use the rest to deal with the divorce. But that's when MLB said, not so fast. Nice try, but we're not letting you use Fox as your get-out-of-jail-free card. MLB Commissioner Bud Selig rejected Franck McCourt's proposed deal with Fox Studios and the Los Angeles Dodgers. The league would go on to claim that McCourt took $189.16 million out of the team for his own personal use, with Selig describing what McCourt was doing with the Dodgers as looting, and other anonymous team executives saying that he was using them as his personal credit card. So with McCourt's attempt to save the team through a new TV deal going down in flames, rumors started to swirl that McCourt wouldn't have enough money to even make payroll and distribute game checks that week. That is when McCourt did the unthinkable, and on June 27th, 2011, he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, and the Dodgers were officially bankrupt.
Story of the day in Los Angeles around sports didn't have to do with the NFL, not the NBA or the Lakers, but Franck McCourt's filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Buster Olney said this is one of the worst days in baseball history.
With a crushing debt load, the owner going through a lengthy divorce and a pricey payroll to make, the Los Angeles Dodgers filed for federal bankruptcy protection. Owner Franck McCourt lays blame to Major League Baseball nixing a multi-billion-dollar TV deal he was counting on to keep the team afloat. In the game of baseball ownership, Franck McCourt is gambling on the court system now instead of his players to hold on to the team.
So you would assume McCourt filing for bankruptcy, thus guaranteeing he would lose ownership of the Dodgers franchise, would be the worst thing in the world for him. But it turned out to be a stroke of genius. See, typically, when a major league team is sold, the commissioner's office has a big hand in selecting the owner, and it's not always to the highest bidder. Major League Baseball is big on fit. They like to pick owners that they think will fall in line with the practices of the league. But this case was different because since McCourt was so broke and owed so much money to creditors and the IRS, the bankruptcy court took precedence over Major League Baseball, and McCourt was within his rights to get as much money as he possibly could in order to pay off his massive debts. Now, the league was so done with McCourt at this point that they chose not to fight it just to expedite the process of getting rid of him. McCourt received several offers. Even Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban was in the running for the Dodgers at one point. But before the start of the 2012 season, McCourt gave his list of potential buyers to Major League Baseball, and they cut that list down to 3 finalists who would be allowed to bid on the Dodgers at an auction. First was Stan Kroenke, the owner of the Denver Nuggets, the Colorado Avalanche, the premier soccer club Arsenal, and of course, he's well known in Southern California for bringing the Rams back to LA. Then there was Stephen Cohen, the hedge fund manager who purchased the New York Mets in 2020 for $2.4 billion. At the time, he owned a minority stake in the Mets and said he would sell them if he won the bid for the Dodgers. And then there was the Guggenheim Group, led by Magic Johnson, Mark Walter, Todd Boehly, Peter Gruber, Lon Rosen, and Stan Kasten. But the auction never took place. The day before it was supposed to be held, Frank McCourt announced in a press release that the Guggenheim Group had purchased the Dodgers for a record $2.15 billion, the most money ever spent to purchase a professional sports franchise. Now, how did Guggenheim buy the team before they went to auction? Well, the day before the auction was set to take place, McCourt met with Mark Walter one-on-one in New York, and McCourt presented a piece of paper from Stephen Cohen that had a $2 billion offer to buy the Dodgers. Walter countered by offering him $2.15 billion plus an interest in the land surrounding Dodger Stadium if McCourt and his partners wanted to develop it. It was a take it or leave it deal from Walter, and McCourt and Walter shook hands and agreed to the deal. After paying off his debt and the IRS, McCourt nearly took home close to $1 billion. Some viewed the over $2 billion purchase of the Dodgers as an exorbitant amount to pay by the Guggenheim Group, but the Guggenheim Group, they had the vision and they knew how lucrative the Dodgers TV contract was going to be, and was it ever. Less than 2 years after buying the team, Time Warner agreed to a 25-year, $8.35 billion contract to broadcast Dodger games. So even though McCourt made out nicely, he could have really made a killing had he just made it to that new TV deal. What's better than $800 million? How about $8 billion? Because that's how much he could have made. But still, he didn't spend a dime of his own money to buy the Dodgers. He bankrupted the Dodgers and was still able to walk away with almost $1 billion. You hate to say it, but McCourt just might be a McGenius. Since the ownership change in 2012, the Dodgers have won more games than any franchise. They won 8 straight division titles from 2013 to 2020. They set a new franchise regular season record twice with 106 wins in 2019 and in